family of
This is democracy.
Good morning, comrades. It is what is the show going to be about this morning? Okay, I have a couple of stories actually. Good morning, Blanca. The pets are not in here. I'm gonna have to go hunt them down. That was probably Kirby music. What's up, Dragon Slayer 19? How you doing, Blanca? How's it going today? I have a couple of stories today, actually. We're gonna talk a little bit about Haiti. I wanted to look at an interview that actually a friend of ours, Austin G, just did about the DSA delegation to Cleidonius, the DSA delegation to Venezuela, and the murder. We want to talk about the murder of the Haitian president as well. I got a little bit more information. I did a little bit of homework on that. We kind of brought it up yesterday as sort of like a general interest news story. I didn't know kind of like where to go with that. Um, but now I have a little bit more context, and there was a really kind of spicy exchange that I saw about that on Democracy Now, and we're gonna watch some of that today. But first, how's everybody doing today? How we doing? Bad stuff. Yeah, nothing good, right? Nothing good. This is where we can start. You want to talk about bad stuff? Elon Musk. He accepts so Lauderdale is apparently going to let this motherfucker build a tunnel to the beach, like from his mansion or something. Fort Lauderdale Commissions on Tuesday accepted a bid from Elon Musk's firm to build a tunnel between the city's downtown area and the beach. Bad egg, absolutely. The mayor, Dean Trantalis, announced in a tweet that the city formally accepted a proposal from the Boring Company. It's boring. To build an underground transit system between downtown and the beach. Other firms will now have 45 days to submit. So they're just doing a tunnel? That's so weird. They're going to pay this motherfucker to do a tunnel. For what? What a genius, man. What they love to talk about how this guy is a genius. But like literally, like he just gets to build a tunnel to the beach. Fort Lauderdale City Commissioner will vote today on whether to accept the proposal represents an innovative approach to address innovative approach. Private tunnels. Florida famous for having very dry, stable underground. Yeah, right. That's right, Dragon Slayer 19. Like that. This sounds actually like a terrible idea. It sounds like motherfuckers are gonna get crushed. I remember in New Orleans there was a tunnel that they made like under um like some of our downtown area, like the quarter and stuff like that, and including a part that went under Canal Street, and they caused giant sinkholes. Um, and just to be clear, like Florida's already having its own problems with like horrible building collapses in Surfside. This doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Doesn't seem like a good idea, but I mean, I guess if a rich guy wants to make giant holes in the earth, who is a local government to stop him from doing that? His tunnels have all been death traps so far. He's done other ones. Has he done other ones? Like, I don't know. I don't know. That was just like a Hello? Hello? Am I back? Don't know what happened there. Hey, everybody. I'm back. Y'all see me? Y'all see me? Am I back? Am I back? I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. I'm back. All right, cool. Thanks, Clayton. Yeah, Elon Musk must have got mad at me. That's what it was. He must have got mad at me. I'm back and seeable. Sorry about the seeable part, but you know how it goes. Cool. I was actually gonna talk about this. So here's an article in the Orinoco Tribune. I'm not familiar with the publication, but it's about I wanted to talk about a little bit further in depth the DSA's delegation that went to Peru and Venezuela, and also I have queued up an interview that Austin G from DSA did last night, actually. But I want to talk about this first. So DSA delegation meets with President Maduro. Uproar already in U.S. And yeah, people are pissed about this, and I find that really interesting. Mostly because, like, I look, if you have problems with the way that like Venezuela specifically like is operating or whatever, like nobody's claiming that it's run perfectly. It's a state, right? That exists in essentially essentially in the backyard as the US looks at it. The US's backyard. And they have a long and storied history of doing coups and destabilizing governments that don't fall into their extractive capitalist program. So I mean, there are things. I'm not making like excuses or anything like that, but that's just context for how for Venezuela is sort of forced to operate. And let's look into the article and let's just sort of like use that to set up the table here. So in Caracas, July 6th, this past Friday, July 2nd, the president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, received a delegation of representatives from the Democratic Socialists of America at the Miraflores Palace in Caracas, where they held a cordial meeting in which political and geopolitical issues would discuss, along with history, on the occasion of the 200-year anniversary of the Battle of Carabobo that consolidated Venezuela's independence from the Spanish Empire. That's, I mean, significant. During the meeting, the activists told the president about their experience during their stay in the country, where they had the opportunity to learn about the advances of the Bolivarian Revolution in industry, social programs, and tourism. Hey, you can see me now, Blanca? Sweet. So here's a photograph. Here's a photograph. Look at the tweet. Let's look at the tweet. Let's look at the tweets, folks. The important part. So there they are. Giving the fist bump. So Venezuela strengthened its ties and cooperation and solidarity with activists and those in the U.S. who struggle for democracy and values, including peace and the sovereignty of the peoples of the world, to strengthen the fight against the blockade promoted by Europe and the United States. So yeah, again, Venezuela is still being blockaded. Been going on for decades since the Chavez revolution, essentially. The SA delegation arrived in Venezuela on June 20th to participate in a bicentennial Congress of the Peoples of the World and fulfill an agenda that allowed them to visit various states of the Caribbean nation. So here's another video, or it's a video showing some of that stuff off.
A esta hora, el presidente constitucional de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, lidera una importante reunión de trabajo con delegación de socialistas de los Estados Unidos. Se trata de una organización que justamente la República Bolivariana de Venezuela Busca estrechar lazos de hermandad y solidaridad con el pueblo estadounidense, con los activistas que luchan por la democracia y valores como la paz y la soberanía de los pueblos para fortalecer la lucha contra el bloqueo y las medidas coercitivas y unilaterales. Participan en esta reunión la presidenta del Comité Político Nacional de la Delegación Socialista Democráticos de los Estados Unidos, el señor Sean Michael Estelle, integrante del Comité Político Nacional que se dedica al trabajo político sindical de base, la señora Carrington Morris, integrante del Comité Internacional, específicamente se dedica a la formación política, el señor Austin González, integrante de los comités de política nacional e internacional, dentro de la organización se dedica en labores de política exterior y relaciones bilaterales. La señora Candy Luisa Herrera es sindicalista e integrante del Comité Internacional y el señor Marvin González, integrante de la Secretaría del Comité Internacional.
So there you go. Among the activists who attended the meeting, the Venezuelan head of state and top government officials were the president of the National Political Committee of the DSA, Dan McKinney, the representative of the political training of the DSA, Carrington Morris, the representative for the political work of the DSA, Sean Estelle, the person in charge of the foreign policy and bilateral relations of DSA, Austin Gonzalez, who we're going to talk about, we're actually hear from in just a minute, labor activist and member of the International Committee, Cindy Luisa Herrera, and Marvin Gonzalez, member of the Secretariat of International Relations. DSA is a socialist and worker. So again, like this is explaining what DSA is. Let's get to the part where people are mad, actually. So here's the right wing. It doesn't translate to Spanish very well. What do you mean? The article? Or the one that the reporter? So yeah, the visit's already causing uproar in political circles where they are trying to associate Democrats' liberal elected officials who are like don't like Venezuela at all. By the way, like Joe Biden would have Maduro shot tomorrow if they could. The titles, okay, they don't translate into Spanish like at all. Maybe we should think about that. They're trying to associate Democrats' liberal elected officials directly with DSA and among the radical Trotskyists and armchair communists who considered the decision inappropriate. Hey, Blanca, do you want to talk about this with me? Do you want to hop on here and talk about this? Let me know if you do. For example, in reference to the DSA visit with Maduro, Ronna McDaniel, the chair of the Republican Party, wrote that Maduro they're doing the same shit they always do. They always talk about how Maduro's a brutal dictator. He's profiting from the starvation of his own people, blah, 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 blah. Like trying to essentially like do the thing where they always like vilify, they vilify the Venezuelan government for the purposes of U.S. propaganda. Now, are these like fair critiques of are these fair critiques that could be like actually levied to make the Venezuela government more responsible to its people? No, that's not the point of them. The point of them is to smear. The point of them is to essentially do what they always do, which is like red baiting, essentially anti-socialism, anti-communism, a tried and true American pastime. So Ronna McDaniel is mad online. Meanwhile, armchair communist, alleged Venezuelan socialists, and U.S. Trotskyists decided to organize a Zoom panel for the 7th, which is yesterday. This article is a couple days old, to inspire a discussion about our pending tasks here in the U.S. to stand in solidarity with Venezuelan people. The sponsors are Tempest Magazine, Venezuelan Workers Solidarity, an unknown group of Venezuelan socialists in the U.S., and Internationalism from Below. I don't know what these groups are. Morning, Dan. You should check out Dan on Twitch, twitch.tv/idamsimpson. Just reading a little bit about the DSA trip to specifically Venezuela here, but we're about to watch an interview with Austin Gonzalez talk about their trip to both Peru and Venezuela. Is that the only places that they went? Blanca, they might have been more to it than that, but they also talk a little bit about Castillo, and let's actually get right to it. Right after this last little bit. Yeah, they went other places. Where'd they go? Here, let's yeah. Let's look at the interview with Austin. So this was from last night on a show called Left Reckoning, which is on. No, it was just Peru and Venezuela. Okay. It was a show called Left Reckoning, which is hosted by Matt Leck and David Griscom. Let's take a look.
We are back. Welcome back to Left Reckoning. David Griscom, Matt Leck. Joining us, I believe maybe the first returning guest of Left Reckoning, actually, now that I think about it. And it couldn't go to a more knowledgeable guest, Austin Gonzalez of Machete Mate podcast, one of my favorites for the topics that we're going to be discussing this evening. Austin, welcome back.
Happy to be back and very honored to be your first repeat.
All right, we're joined by Blanca. Good morning, Blanca.
Good morning.
How you doing? I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the trip to Venezuela and all of the things that you're seeing. Blanca has she's actually a member of the Democratic Socialist of America National Political Committee, and she is deeply involved with the International Committee as well. She's one of the key members.
Okay, so this was really fun. It took months to get this to happen. So we started the work for this last year around fall. So we sent 8 people to Venezuela. We sent a few people to Peru for the elections, which turned out to be really, really crucial.
Incredible.
Yes. So, everything, we paid for everything. Well, the members, of course, we pay dues, so then we can do things like this. So the members paid for it. When they went to Venezuela, they went to different parts. They got to talk to different people, not just government people. They went and talked to unions. They went and talked to communes. They went and talked to a large, I would say a representative portion of the working class there, and also their government. What was the other question? Yeah, that's where they went. Those were 2. I mean, that's pretty huge for our first delegations ever. I think to do back to back was really great to pull it off. So next year, be on the lookout. We are going to send people to Brazil and other places.
Nice. And just to kind of get on some of these questions I have just kind of about it. What is the purpose of sending delegations? What is the purpose of DSA sending these delegations to places like Peru and Venezuela? Because there's been a little bit of pushback even among the left. I'm a little bit I guess I can understand perhaps if I'm doing a good faith reading where you're coming from here potentially, but I mean there's sort of questioning the reasoning behind sending a delegation to Venezuela and Peru. Specifically Venezuela. What would you say? How would you respond to that, I guess?
Well, we didn't invite ourselves there first. Second, we passed a resolution in 2019 that we were going to focus more on Latin America, and Latin American mass movements than European. So, we didn't invite ourselves. All of this was with Peru. We got invited not just by Peru Libre, but also by Nuevo Peru to go to Peru. So we weren't inviting ourselves. And then for this Congreso Bicentennial it was every leftist in the in the world that was there. I mean, as many as possible under COVID, of course, but I mean, they've met with hundreds of people from all over the world. It is unheard of for people to get so, I mean, for me, they just can't handle it. People to get so upset when there are meetings like this all over the place, all over the place. So this was just being held there to celebrate their Independence Day. So we were invited again. And I think that, you know what? I think like coming from like El Salvador, also the US Yankees have like a different opinion of it and don't really understand what it's like. I think for us to send a very proportional delegation in terms of political views down there to see it for themselves, like live in 4K, they can see it. It really kind of pushes back on the narrative that we've always heard, that it's bad, that people are starving, like people are like dying on the streets every second, and that's just not happening. They're not. Yes, conditions are bad, but why are they bad? The U.S. sanctions. And I think that's what we have to highlight. That's our job here in Empire, is to fight back against these things.
Yeah,
something we can all agree on.
Yeah, and one of the things that I find really interesting, and I'm like I understand like if you have critiques of the Venezuelan government or things like that, but like the one way to make sure that those critiques are not heard is to not engage, right? Like I don't know, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in terms of like we need to isolate ourselves from like anything that we have any kinds of critiques from in that sense. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling on here.
No, we just want to be we're a serious organization. I think coming into, we had our boost from Bernie, Trump, then Bernie, and now I think we're just going into this stage where we are a serious organization and we want other people to see it. And we want other countries to also know about it. But also I think it really just gives a signal to like the Biden administration that we're not going away. We're not going away.
You want to hang on and watch this interview with Austin?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, we're going to start this up. And if you want me to pause it for anything, if you want to add anything in, just let me know.
Guest, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
No, we're thrilled. We're thrilled to have you, especially such a jet set guest. Austin's going to talk to us a little bit about these DSA delegations to both Peru and Venezuela. I just wanted to note that I don't have my props with me right now, that Left Reckoning is still very much firmly a pencils out podcast.
Oh, yes.
We were all very excited, and I'm still very inspired by Pedro Castillo's victory. Though, as we've been watching, unfortunately, there's still a lot of question marks about it. The results of the election are not in question at all. But the fervor of the right wing and whether or not the Western imperial powers are going to play ball with the Peruvian right wing is very much a large question. Could you talk about Keiko Fujimori's sort of refusal to accept Pedro Castillo's election results?
Absolutely. So a little bit of background here. As you mentioned, I went to Peru to observe their elections on behalf of the Democratic Socialists of America, right? I'm a member of both the National Political Committee of DSA as well as their international committee. That was kind of like the basis for our delegation. And we worked in collaboration with a couple other groups that do this regularly, including the Progressive International, as well as the Party of the European Left, and a couple other Sao Paulo Forum was there as well. A couple different groups that do election observing. We met with a lot of different groups down there, and the common theme from groups that we would meet with, human rights orgs, political parties, social movements, the common theme was a fear that regardless of whether or not Castillo would win, that the right wing would try to steal this election in a few different ways.
I remember having this conversation like right before the election took place. I was actually on Meet the Left with Dan Dan's a producer of that show with Kenzo. We talked with a couple other folks about like the fears that on the front end of the election taking place, that that even if Castillo won, or if it was close, they would essentially try and do, the Kiko administration would essentially try and do the thing where they claim victory, like the thing that everybody was afraid that Trump was going to do. Essentially was what everybody was afraid that not everybody, but like what the left was afraid that like Kiko would do, which is just declare victory and sort of try and ride that wave in when and early returns from cities came in.
Which is manifesting itself as we speak.
And it's also very funny, by the way, that like as this kind of conversation goes on, when it comes to Peru, like the support for Castillo was largely rural, and the support for Kiko, the sort of like, conservative, like liberal, I guess you could say, was largely urban, which is almost like, I don't know, it seems like a reversal of like, I mean, I guess the Democratic Party is obviously not a good analog for like Castillo, but like the way that the US is constructed is that like the right is like in the right wing of America feels like it comes from rural areas, and the sort of like center, I guess you could say, the Democratic Party or whatever, has like all of its support in cities.
Referenced the two biggest concerns,
which I guess makes sense when you think about it in terms of like that's where capital is concentrated in both situations.
That election observers had, and not just us, but once again, human rights organizations on the ground that we talked to, was one, we feared a situation like what happened in Bolivia in 2019 for their coup, which is to say that Peru, much like Bolivia, has rural communities that lean heavily toward Pedro Castillo in this case, Evo in Bolivia's case, but rural communities whose votes come in later, right? So there was a concern that the urban vote would come in first, and because the urban vote would come in first, Keiko would just declare victory. Now, luckily that did not happen, but for anybody who was sitting on pins and needles on election day, it was very tight, and the urban vote did come in first, and it was, once again, people were a little worried that something like that would happen. The second concern is the one that is manifesting itself right now, which is that the margin would be so razor thin, which we all knew it was going to be very, very tight, but that the margin would be so razor thin that Keiko and the right wing would do what they're doing right now, which is attempt to death by 1,000 cuts, right? Muddy up the process, attempt to scrutinize as many votes as possible. Find, very similar to Donald Trump and Stop the Steal, right? Try and find instances of maybe bureaucratic incompetence, right? And say, this is systemic fraud. You see, they cheated us. Even though this is, once again, any example, they've not given any examples of systematic fraud. That's the bottom line. They've not given any actual examples of Peru Libre, once again, which it boggles my mind how they would somehow rig the election, even though the right wing's in power in Peru. But that's a whole other conversation entirely, I suppose. But this is a very real fear. And this is a very real concern from the activists on the ground in Peru that they're going to stop Castillo from getting inaugurated. Now, I don't know, asking my opinion, right? I don't know that they'll successfully be able to coup him before he takes office. But it's terrifying that we even have to have this conversation, right? And as soon as we left Peru, our friends on the ground, the unions we met with, the activist groups we met with, were giving us alarm bells almost immediately, saying, hey, this is very concerning, right? And this is despite...
That's fucking scary. Like, I don't know. Like the fact... I mean, look, the U.S. has again, in the context of the U.S.'s history of constantly overturning left governments in Central and South America, like this is an absolutely like imminent threat that just kind of permanently exists, right, Blanca?
Yes.
It's constantly there.
Yep, always.
So like you just kind of like, I don't know, like you just have to be ready to stop the steal in a lot of weird ways, right?
In so many different ways, seriously.
the OAS putting out a statement saying, hey, these elections were clean, let's chill out, Keiko, blah, blah, blah. This is despite that. They've still, like, the media in Peru is so deeply right-wing. They've been in lockstep with Keiko the whole time.
Mhm.
So for our comrades on the ground in Peru, all they see is the Peruvian media saying, oh, yeah, you see fraud. Oh, my goodness, this guy Castillo. Whereas there's an interesting dynamic where that the international community just kind of sees, once again, these OAS reports or what the U.S. State Department put out, which have mostly been like, oh, we should respect the results. In Peru, completely different. And that's why people are very afraid that there might be some sort of preemptive coup to stop Castillo. Like I said, maybe I'm optimistic. I don't know. I think I want to. It's like I said, it scares me that I'm even this uncertain because of, once again, how tight the vote margin is. But I mean, we'll see. This is a developing story fully.
Well, for sure. I will say, one thing that does give me a little bit of confidence is just because papers like the Washington Post and the New York Times already have like a grammar and a logic to report on this. Basically, they're saying, oh, he's doing a Trump. They've immediately taken a posture against Keiko, which is, very beneficial. I'm very happy to see.
That's a funny point.
It is crazy how that happened, actually.
Yeah?
I was not expecting the OAS to, as quickly as they did, announce something,
Mhm.
We're like, I mean, the OAS is responsible for so many bad things in Latin America also, but for them to
Bolivia
come out
right now, they're
Right.
responsible for what's going on with Evo.
Yes. So it's just been how do I say this? It was just a big deal.
Mhm.
So honestly, we're gonna come to next week, no, 2 weeks from now, and they're gonna have to announce it.
They have to announce the Castillo victory.
Yeah, they will have to.
Mhm.
The country will it's already divided. It'll just be bad, I think. But I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be fine. I think she's just melting down. That time of monsters, we're literally watching them just melt down. So I think that's it. She's like freaking out. What would you do if you knew you were going to jail for 30 years?
Everything you could to not go to jail.
Right. So that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
This is the
She would rather be president than go to jail for 30 years, right? That's the position.
Should I say benefit, right, of having your opposition be led by a literal political criminal, right?
Yeah.
Keiko was literally in prison just last year. She was on house arrest in Lima and could barely campaign. So that's another dynamic entirely. In fact, a lot of the average Peruvians we spoke to, they would talk about the corruption, right? They would say, I'm supporting Castillo because we do not want to, the Fujimorismo, right? That's a legacy of corruption in Peru.
Yeah, you mentioned Machete Mate, that the negative partisanship angle was very pronounced in Lima, especially. Like it was where it was anti Fujimori and anti Castillo. Can you just speak to that a little bit and how it differs from the actual outside Lima?
100%. Negative campaigning was now, to be clear, I spent all my time in Lima. So all I saw was the negative campaigning. I wish I could have gone to the rural communities where it was a very different dynamic, right? Like you just look at the vote in cities like Ayacucho, which are in the rural areas, 80% for Pedro Castillo. My God, that's an insane margin. But yes, as you mentioned, in Lima, it's fun.
I just dropped the link to this video, by the way. There's a lot more to this show. You should definitely check out Left Reckoning if you haven't done already.
As soon as I landed in Lima, there were two hilarious things that I saw almost immediately. The first hilarious thing that I saw immediately, as soon as we got off the plane, you know how at the airport you'll see people holding up signs for, oh, I'm your chauffeur for whatever. There was literally somebody with a sign that said OAS, right? OAS. So that was just hilarious to see. Oh, great. The OAS is on the scene to steal the election. That's fun. Although, yeah, luckily that did not happen. But the second thing that was super hilarious that we saw almost immediately, the first political billboard we saw, which it said, it was big, bold letters, 5 days to vote no to communism, right?
Wow.
And that was Keiko's campaign, totally negative, which is this is a senderista, the shining path of the communists. We need to stop them. This is unacceptable, right? And as you referenced, Matt, and as I referenced a little bit earlier, the people we talked to in Lima, and the average people, right? Not the political parties. Obviously, the political parties had a much more, I suppose, robust reason for supporting Castillo. The average people, right? We made it a mission to talk to our cab drivers, right? Who are you voting for? There's a really big election coming up, right? You got to have some sort of opinions. Every single one of them, except for one, said, I'm supporting Castillo, and the reason is because of the corruption, right? Because of the corruption of people like Keiko Fujimori. That message, that campaign slogan, no más pobres en un país rico, right? No more poverty in a rich country, that resonated. And it's true, you know, we talk on...
That is like one of the prevailing lines that comes through like so many of these sort of popular left campaigns, is that to end poverty, to end like this crazy like inequality that we have. I mean, that was kind of like evocative of Bernie, you know. It's a message that sells, that people pick up on.
Machete Mate, my podcast all the time, about how Peru is one of those countries it's like a sleeping giant, right? This is the former seat of the Inca Empire. It should be like in the G20 or whatever, and actually like a country that doesn't have such a stratified society between rich and poor, between indigenous and, you know, I don't know, Spaniard descended, whatever we want to call it, right? Criollo, whatever one we want to use. So it's that message truly it was clear to me, at least, that message resonated to the average Peruvian. So that the dynamics in Lima are unique in that, once again, Lima is also a pro-Keiko stronghold. Keiko dominated in Lima. So it was still fascinating to see how many average people still supported Castillo despite all of that in Lima.
No, it is absolutely fascinating. And I want to ask you in a moment about you know, your experience and the relationships that you're able to foster like through DSA in that part of the world. But before I get to that, I just want to take another opportunity to ask you to sort of explain the gist of Pedro Castillo's campaign, like policy-wise, what it represented. And I'd really like if you could talk a little bit about the coalitions that were brought into power, because I know you and I have chatted a little bit about this privately, but it was amazing how almost immediately the story about Pedro Castillo in a lot of American left circles was, you know, this is some kind of red-brown alliance, right, with this horrible social conservative monster, you know. And that wasn't the coalition that was being built. It was actually a really inspiring coalition that was bringing people who weren't very much represented by the political process before, and had a very strong working class message.
Yeah, like that was the other thing that sort of happened here, is that like the Keiko campaign kind of ran like a woke campaign, right? They kind of ran like they were the ones that like were doing the were like doing the like, oh, we have a woman slave queen, oh, she's also like Japanese, right, of Japanese descent. Like that's wild, don't you know? I don't know, it's one of those things that you see a lot in the US.
For sure.
And brought in a lot of the left organizations, left parties. Anyways, you're the one who went there and talked to all the folks and saw things on the ground, so please tell me what you saw.
Oh my goodness, so much to unpack there. And yes, the very, very important questions to touch upon here. So I think something that's so critical to point out, there's a couple things that are critical to point out here. Every feminist group we met with, every, you know, group we met from the gay community in Peru, they were all firmly supporting Pedro Castillo. Out of the two candidates, Pedro Castillo and Keiko Fujimori, only one of them met with members of the gay community, and it wasn't Keiko Fujimori, right? Keiko comes from the far right, from the evangelical far right, right? So my position is, us, especially us leftists in the United States, rather than talk over the gay community in Peru or talk over the feminist community in Peru, let's listen to them. If we are troubled by some of the things Pedro Castillo said in the past, let's listen to what the Peruvians who are actually going to live under his administration are saying, right? Let's see what their opinions are, right? And they were firmly behind Pedro Castillo. DSA's longest running historical partner in Peru is the party Nuevo Peru, right? Which is their politics are almost to a T the same as DSA, right? I would say, or you just, you know, democratic socialist. It's a feminist party. Once again, this is a pro LGBTQ plus party in Peru. Every single one of them firmly backing Castillo. There was a story, a news story, a couple weeks before the election where Pedro Castillo worked out a deal with Veronica Mendoza, the leader of the Nuevo Peru party, saying, "Hey, we're going to, get better on social issues, and we can collaborate with, let's work together. The priority is a new constitution, right? A constitution made by and for Peruvians, right?" And this was a message that resonated with a lot of people in Peru. So I think it's critical to point that out. I think it's also critical to point out once again.
That's what a coalition is, right? Like, I don't know. There's one of these sort of problems that we have on the left is that when we have, like in America at least, like if our group isn't like the one that's a part of it, we just sort of take our ball and go home.
Yes.
Coalitions are super important.
It's the reason they won. It's the reason Pedro Castillo is winning.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. There has to be, at least at some level, just okay, the Castillo, like you say, they had some kind of social conservative issues within that party, right? That's real, and that needs to be dealt with, to be clear. However, it's definitely better than the fucking, liberal capitalist U.S. influenced Kiko regime.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a perfect situation, but I mean, it's superior than what we got.
100%. Yeah.
Coalition, every single aspect of it mattered, right? Just look at that vote total. What did he win by? 50.2%. Like, we even met with some of the smaller parties, right? The Partido Comunista Patria Roja, right? Literally the party that was founded by the Peruvian Marxist Jose Carlos Mariatti, right? The Communist Party of Peru. Even those small parties, if literally just one of them peeled off of this coalition, he probably wouldn't have won. So this truly it's such a remarkable story to see this candidate who basically came out of nowhere be able to forge, to have a message that was able to resonate so deeply to so many Peruvians that the entire left and entire progressive forces were able to come together in this movement to get this guy elected. And David, you asked me a little bit kind of about Pedro Castillo's politics himself or whatever. I think another important point to make here, and perhaps this might be, my own opinion here, just from my interactions. I did get a chance to meet with Pedro Castillo as well, which was a very interesting experience.
Sick.
I don't know that this is a guy who's particularly motivated by ideology, to be completely honest, right? I see a lot of people trying to put different labels on him, whether it be negative labels like machista, whether it be people on the left saying, this is a guy who's coming from, who's a Marxist-Leninist. His party is certainly kind of like Marxist-Leninist, but he himself, I don't know that I would say that about him, right? I don't know that this is a guy that's motivated by ideology. I think this is a guy who came from the teachers union movement, who looks around in his community and says, why the hell is everybody so poor, right, in a country that has so many resources, right? I think this is a person who truly is an organic reflection of the massive upheaval that just happened in Peru last year, right? I think, and I tie this to one of the biggest lessons that I draw for the left here in the United States from Peru, which is Pedro Castillo and Peru Libre. They were able to tap into that anger that manifested itself in protests that happened worldwide, right? I don't know. In fact, I'd say it's pretty clear to say that the left in the United States was not able to do that to the extent, at least, that happened in Peru, right? The massive protests that happened after the killing of George Floyd, right? Nationwide, right? The left in the United States was not able to properly, to tap into that anger in ways that I saw happen in Peru, right? Because Peru simultaneously had a massive protest upheaval where, they went through 3 presidents in the span of a year, which was insane in and of itself. But Pedro Castillo was able to tap into that, right, with his campaign platform. And once again, it was so amazing to see a community, a leftist movement, which has, you'd be hard pressed to find a left in this hemisphere that has been through as much as the Peruvian left has in the last few decades, right? That's probably an understatement, right? So it's just so amazing to see these people who have struggled for so long get this moment, right? And which is why it's so important to be pushing back against all this coup BS that's coming from the right wing. It's a desperate attempt from Keiko Fujimori to stay out of prison, which, sorry, Keiko, you're going back to prison. And yes, I'm an abolitionist, but it will be funny to.
He's Austin does great. He's really good at this.
He is really, really good.
Maybe we got to get him on GMC. I think if I message him and come on.
Yeah, he will totally.
I got to get him on here.
Is he here? Go back to prison. Maybe that's been spirited. I don't know.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, lock her up.
There we go. Now we're talking.
I think the stuff about DSA we can actually sort of pack in with Venezuela, and maybe Matt and I will just save this Oppenheimer. I don't know, like Austin, you're bringing a lot of like positive energy into this room right now, and I'm liking it. So I don't want to bring in any opinions from Miami,
Some goon,
into this conversation right now. But I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience in Venezuela.
You know what that was in reference to? Opinions from Miami?
No.
Huh.
Bring in any opinions from Miami,
some goon,
into this conversation right now. But
I don't know what that's about.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your experience in Venezuela because, I mean, we're going to put the DSA conversation and kind of reflect as like American leftists at the second part. You go to Venezuela. Venezuela is a country that is really demonized in the United States. You know, a big repose of most DSA members is to say, oh, we don't support, I shouldn't say most DSA members, but a lot of people will make this argument. We don't support Venezuela, blah, blah, blah. There's not a lot of information and media coverage of what's going on in Venezuela, except for the most extremely biased stuff possible. You go into Venezuela, and what was your experience? What did you see? Who did you speak to? Just paint us a little bit of a picture here.
Oh man. Okay. Once again, a lot to unpack here. I think it's important to take a little bit of a step back here. Once again, from the U.S. left perspective, right? DSA was just a couple thousand members pre-Donald Trump, right? After the giant membership boom that has happened in DSA, a lot of our internal structures have gone through a process of catching up with that boom, right? I would say that this is the beginning of our international committee and our kind of like foreign.
I love that he's talking about structures within DSA. Like that's like something that gets lost in the sauce like so much. Like the fact that it's scaled up from like times almost 20 in the past like 4 years is ridiculous. And like it's just building, like literally building the plane while you're flying it. You know what I mean? I mean, you know probably better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So it's good that he checks that.
Wing, whatever we want to call it, beginning to catch up with the structures, right? And that means coordinating internationally with other leftist movements, other socialist movements throughout our hemisphere, throughout the world, right? I also, I think I might have mentioned this the last time I was on, I don't remember. I was also in London in 2019 for their elections, which, good God, that was depressing to see Boris Johnson win. But we've also done these sorts of things in Europe, right? This was the first time we sent an official delegation of this sort to a place like Venezuela, and it was, oh man, to say it was an interesting experience, that's like the understatement of the century, right? So the reason we went down there was to attend the Bicentennial Congress of the Peoples, is what it was called. Now, what this Congress was for was it was essentially an international gathering celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Carabobo, led by Simon Bolivar, which basically guaranteed Venezuelan independence, right? So it wasn't just DSA down there. There was plenty of different international left groups, plenty of different prominent international leftists. I had the honor of having a brief little moment with Evo Morales in the hotel lobby, which was hilarious, right? I met with
that's crazy.
In fact, something I know that we did talk about the last time I was on, we talked a bit about Ecuador. I met Jaime Vargas, the now former president of CONAE, who was a major character during everything that was happening in Ecuador at the time. We met with a lot of different international groups. I think this is so critical for members of the United States left, right? And this is why, and something I know that you both are going to share, this is why Michael Brooks was such an important voice in the U.S. left, because of his stances on foreign policy, right? More people on the U.S. left should be as bold as Michael Brooks was, right? And I think hopefully this is the beginning of people seeing a group like DSA go to Venezuela and thinking, oh,
thank you to Urxel for following.
Okay, maybe Venezuela isn't the boogeyman that I've been told it is, right? And that's not to say Venezuela doesn't have its problems, right? Of course it has its problems. It's a government, right? I don't understand anybody who either stands a government, right, or uniquely vilifies a government, right? There are successes and failures we can learn from them, right? And it was remarkable to me to hear from the average Venezuelan how nuanced their opinion was on the political situation, right? I don't know that we met a single person who was like, ah, yes, we love Maduro and long live the revolution, right? Every opinion was very nuanced. It was, yeah, this government has issues, right? But this is the government that is supporting the commune project, right? This is the government that is trying to carry the revolution forward. Revolution's not easy. Revolution's messy, believe it or not. It's not linear, dare I say, right?
No,
and
no,
so I think
it's not a button that.
That's the thing too. Like a lot of the critiques that I see of this, like, are like I'm trying to like be as kind as I can to the people that are making these critiques as I possibly can be, but like they seem to me to be largely like theoretical, if you know what I mean. Like they don't take into account the messiness of reality.
Right. Exactly.
That sort of like when the rubber actually hits the road, you have to sort of like do something to kind of keep the whole thing together.
Right.
And plus, I mean, again, the U.S. constantly does everything it can to destroy left, like, you know, often known as pink tide governments. I mean, it's been had an embargo on Cuba, for example, for 50 years. You know, essentially cutting it off from the U.S. sphere of trade. Like that means that Cuba essentially has to be entirely self-sufficient or find other trading partners that'll deal with them, and that's like not an easy thing to do.
Right. It's really sad. Terrible.
And then, I mean, fortunately, Cuba's been able to do that.
Right.
In a lot of ways, but it is wild that like it's almost like you take the kid, it's like the bully. You like have him like grab him by the hand and you hit him in the face with their own hand and you say, tell them to stop hitting themselves,
That you press, right? Or a
Exactly.
decree, right? You don't write it on a piece of paper. It's like, okay, we're a communist, or like we're a socialist country now, right? Like Trump style, and like put in front of the cameras and then everything changes. It's a process, something that you build, right? Anyways.
Yes, no, you're exactly right. Like something, an example I like to use is that like if we had elected Bernie president, right? It's not like he could just, as you say, click the socialism button, right? There's quite a lot of steps that would have to be taken to get us to a
I would love to just press the socialism button. That would be lovely. Let's just do that. Why didn't we press the socialism button? That was idiots.
To even get, Medicare for all, things like that, right? So once again, I think it's so important to go to these places where, okay, well, the left has been in government, right? What struggles have they faced? What lessons can they give us, right? What pitfalls can we try and hope to avoid? Right? And I think I go back to the meeting with the commies, right? Because to me, these are some of the purest like expressions of socialism, like in our time, right? And it's interesting. So to go a little
so
bit
you cut out a little bit.
Right?
You said the communes, right?
Yes, the communes.
Okay.
For me, the communes are some of the most purest expressions of socialism in our time, right? And like for me, and just a little bit about the communes themselves, right? These are communities in Venezuela that literally are taking the role of the state. Like I cannot emphasize that enough. Before I went to Venezuela, I only had
that kind of like sounds like a combination of mutual aid and co-ops to me, if that makes any sense. And that's like not my necessarily like vision of the way things ought to go, but it's almost like a part of the picture. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what, when he describes this, that's what it sounds like to me. Like it's taking a part of the state's role, like these communes, like that makes like even if that's not what you want to have like be the final form of what the state is going to do or whatever, like it's kind of like a, I don't even want to say like a band-aid, but like it's just something that is going to come into place because people are going to, like, people in a community are going to watch out for that community. Like it's just what happens, hopefully, at least. I mean, if that doesn't happen, you have a very, very dangerous community.
Right, they do, I think, take care of each other a lot.
Yeah. So like and that kind of like gets to the thing when people talk trash about like mutual aid and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know, we're probably going to need that. We're probably going to need people taking care of one another,
We really are, like, in so many different ways. We talk about the socialism button. What if we had Medicare? What if Bernie had won and then he'd come in and was like, oh yeah, Medicare for all is here. It is a thing for everyone. but we haven't really stopped to think about what happens to like the rural communities where there are really hardly any doctors, or if there's any hospitals still there, they're like on the verge of being shut down. I think about the ones here and what happens then. We will have to have some form of mutual aid to reach them. I mean, we're not going to just start building. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's a process,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, and until we get to the world where there's gonna be like there is everything for everybody, like the ideal, the utopian ideal of communism, which like, might not be achievable in our lifetimes. Hopefully it is, but like if we don't we at least need to do the best that we can, like through
Right.
state mechanisms and through non-state mechanisms. Like that doesn't seem particularly controversial to me.
Right. Me either.
Conception of the communes as like, or the conception I had of the communes were based off of some of the more famous ones, like El Maizal, which is a giant like corn commune where they produce corn, which is very important for the Venezuelan diet, right? I knew about the pioneros, right? The pioneers who like build their own homes, who are like squatters that have like taken over land.
Hell yeah.
What I learned is how these communes, they do everything, right? They manufacture and produce corn. They build houses. They clean up their communities. They provide security for their communities. They are almost forced to fulfill the role of the state because the state has been so devastated by the blockade and the sanctions and the unilateral coercive measures that global capital has imposed on Venezuela. It's amazing. We've come. I came to a Venezuela that has learned how to get by under sanctions. And how have they learned to do that? Because of things like the communes, because of these communities, once again, full of hate. It's amazing. I even phrased it this way, which perhaps, I don't know, is maybe a bit dramatic, but it truly is what it felt like. You literally see the withering away of the state, so to speak, in real time. And it's an amazing thing to see. And I think there's once again so much to be learned. I don't know if I'm cutting in and out, but my Wi-Fi might be messing up here.
You were, but it was we got the general gist of it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's important if nothing else, and this is why I really thought that all the things you were seeing on Twitter, for example, of DSA members who were there, just sharing pictures and videos and things like that. Just being able to push through a lot of the nonsense and the portrayals of Venezuela to understand what it actually is. Because, like, let's imagine for a second that there wasn't like a media, like, okay, there's the actual blockade, but there wasn't also a media blockade, right? There would be a lot of interesting and nuanced conversations to have about Venezuela and the project there, right? But what we're especially saying right now is that you don't even see anything there. The ability to have any kind of nuanced conversation or understanding of it is extremely hampered. And one thing that I thought that was so good about this moment was I've always felt sooner or later, especially as DSA and the American left becomes a little bit more international, people were going to have to sort of come face to face with the way that a lot of American leftists think and talk about the rest of the world. And
yeah,
some people were asking us about the media coverage about Venezuela, about like the DSA delegation to Venezuela, and pretty much all that I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, was just the right wingers having a field day. But I felt it was a good moment for at least people to start getting a little bit stronger and just start working those muscles of being able to talk intelligently about Venezuela instead of just doing the traditional like denying game, because that really hurts our ability to stand with our other comrades across the hemisphere, right? If everyone else is having a certain position on this kind of thing, and the American leftists are the ones that are so holy and mighty, right? Who don't have very much state power, real serious ambitions of taking it here right now, we're the ones that are too, clean.
That is such an excellent point.
Yes.
Like the fact that and look, like we don't have very much state power here, so like we should be doing the things that we can to build that state power. And like one of the things that like I've seen is rolled out as an argument, which I don't agree with, is that this is something that like sending a delegation, DSA sending a delegation to Venezuela, like alienates the working class in America. And I'm just so like, what does that mean? Like who are you to like puppet the working class like by saying that? Like that doesn't make very much sense to me. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, we do need to show solidarity, because if we're there for other people, this is one of the things that we can do by being more international and showing support for socialism where it is. That support can be reciprocated, but we need to put ourselves out there first.
Right. We have to build it.
Yeah, exactly.
Venezuela to have solidarity with everyone else on the continent. I think that's a problem. But so you were able to see the communes, and could you talk about the conversations that were being had between the DSA delegations and other like left organizations and groups and folks that you all were meeting, activists and organizers?
Sure, absolutely. Not only so, this that I'm going to say, the reaction that we would get from other delegations was not just limited to them. This reaction we also got from average people, which is such excitement to meet with friends from the United States.
Hell yeah.
Because as you've kind of touched upon, David, the United States, members of the left in the United States have kind of avoided this space for too long, right?
Yeah.
And this happened in Peru as well. People were so happy to meet with people from the United States. People were just like, "What? You're from the United States? Oh my!" Like it was an amazing thing to see. And like, I think I think this is, at least in my mind, this is only the beginning of that, or at least I hope so. Perhaps this might surprise people to hear. You mentioned the conversation that happened on like Twitter or in the news media. I was happy to see this. I saw ideological growth. I saw debate. I saw conversation, right? I'd rather confront our contradictions on this and try and hash this out, rather than like, okay, let's just hide this in the closet and not even act like this is a thing. No, let's actually have this conversation. Let's see what we think about this. Let's grow ideologically. And personally, dare I say, I enjoy doing things that piss off Elliot Abrams personally and ruin his day. I enjoy doing things that make their chair of the Republican Party put out a tweet saying, "Oh my God, the DSA," right? We should take pride in that. Personally, I say we should be happy that we ruined Elliot Abrams' day. I would say. But going back to the core of your question there, because I just had to get that one out. We're so happy to see DSA there, right? We're so happy to, obviously, it wouldn't surprise anybody to know that one of the first things that a lot of delegations would ask is this: "Oh my God, Ocasio-Cortez, do you guys know her?" That sort of thing, right? Because it's amazing to see how amazing and well-known AOC is as just a worldwide figure. Like it's anybody who thinks, "Oh, is she furthering the cause of socialism?" Tell that to these people who see her as a major inspiration basically anywhere you go, at least anywhere I went. It was truly remarkable to see.
No, I mean that's such an interesting point too, and like for people to realize what the U.S. left looks like from the outside too, right? And where people are seeing the moments and the movements. I think that's a really interesting perspective.
Can you just talk about getting along those lines, like the perspective offered by looking outside of electoral politics in the States? Like, for instance, like rewriting a Fujimori constitution, right? There are limits we all know to electoralism. When you get a mass sort of mandate to do something like that, that is like amazing. And talk about that.
Sure, that's to me one of the things that's unique. You use the example of the Constitution. To me, that's one of the unique things about the left, at least in Latin America, right? They have been able to, in some places, in Peru, in Venezuela, right? What was Chavez's campaign slogan in 1998 or 1999, right? We're going to rewrite the Constitution, right? They are able to truly use these electoral campaigns to make systemic change happen. This is why I go back to what I say earlier. There's a lot of lessons to be drawn from this. It makes me sad whenever I see people who uphold the democratic socialist tradition, in my mind, turning a blind eye to some of the most successful democratic socialist projects of our time, like almost literally, right? So like, it's amazing to see what's happening.
It's also a thing about that happens too, especially in Louisiana. And like, I don't know if it's like that in Arkansas where you're at, but I know in a lot of southern states and like conservative states, like how people would call red states, like if people aren't running on like big ideas to like change the Constitution, the reactionaries absolutely will. Like the right wing in Louisiana is constantly running on, let's do a constitutional amendment to make sure that you are able to get guns. Let's make sure we have a constitutional amendment in place so that you could like we outlaw abortion and stuff like that. Like it's they're constantly doing that, and like the liberals are just like, well, we can't mess with anything or do anything good ever. Like it's crazy.
It is very crazy.
And they also say like anytime like anybody opposes them with those big ideas, they're just sort of like, well, you're not serious, you know? Like it's very very bizarre. Like there's this sort of like grounding in like this fake reality that things are the way that they are. They're the best they can possibly be. The only change that can ever happen is that things get worse. It's crazy.
It's bizarre.
Happening in Chile right now as well, very similarly, you know, movement to change the constitution. Now, I know that's perhaps a more awkward conversation in the United States where the Constitution is the Bible and holy, and that I don't know how.
But states constitutions absolutely are not holy. They are fucking pieces of paper that nobody gives a shit about.
Movement to change the Constitution would look here. But I think there's so many lessons to be drawn between like actually using an electoral campaign to make actual, dare I say, revolutionary change happen. I would call what happened in Venezuela a revolution when Chavez was elected and was able to change the constitution, right? What has happened in Chile right now, that is a revolution, right? They are shredding the Pinochet constitution as we speak. Right?
Yeah.
Beautiful. And in Peru, if they're able to do the same, they truly are on the cusp of a revolution. Let's just think about that for a second. Peru, this is the Lima group, the right-wing alliance is capitaled in Peru, right? If we could get Peru to shred, if the Peruvians can get Peru to shred the Fujimori constitution and create something new, to say that is like that would change the region is an understatement, which is why I go back to why this is so important for people in the United States to be paying attention to. It's so important for people in the United States to be supporting this. So important for people in the United States to be actively resisting these coup efforts that are very, very real. Because once again, this is the beginning of, I don't know if we want to call it the resurgence of the pink tide. I'm a little biased and would say maybe it was never gone, and the death of the pink tide narrative was a bit of a kind of like ephemeral narrative that was sort of forced through things such as the way they took down the PT in Brazil, right? These manufactured, like Lava Jato, right? These manufactured corruption scandals, because fundamentally the pink tide, it's not Chavez, it's not Lula, it's not Castillo, it's the people, right? And you can do your best. Look at Bolivia, right? You can do your best to get rid of Evo. The people haven't forgotten all the gains that were made under Mas, right? You can do your best to get rid of those figureheads. You can do your best to divide the left in Ecuador, right? The fact of the matter is that the people remember the way things were under these leftist governments, right? And that's not right. The pink tide is why, once again, the tide. We can say it's back, but I would say it was never gone in the first place. But I'm biased.
I love that, and like especially like regarding Evo, that's like such a critical point as like. You saw under the coup government, like, you can even say like, okay, Evo starts to like drift away. Like, I'm just taking devil's advocate for a second. He drifts away. He doesn't have the deepest connections with folks. But the moment that the people needed to be called upon, the people were there because the organization had been done. The contacts were there. The memory was there. And that's the kind of political organizing that people need to start to recognize. We have to be here too, because it's not just building the right platform. Though I will say we have learned from Pedro Castillo that a good gimmick can go a long way.
Yes.
What?
I'm using the pencil emoji from now on.
Oh, it's so perfect. We have to be building them. In just the last second before you head out, I just wanted to hear you respond to this specifically with Peru, but also in Venezuela, because there were some people who were like, I hate to even bring it up, but we're basically, this is just like a great time for like middle class Americans to go on a fun tour and go Latin American,
that's what comes up like all the fucking time. That is like such a bullshit fake critique that constantly pops up.
I know, I hate it so much. Okay, I'm so sorry. I have to jump off, but Austin's great. He said he will come on Good Morning Comrade, so I will connect you to.
You messaged him?
Yes.
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll connect you. I hope I'll see the show tomorrow, and I'll talk to everybody soon.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Vacation.
Blanca's the best. You should definitely follow. You should definitely check out like be paying attention to the stuff that Blanca does at best_EV on Twitter. She rules.
Could you talk about one, how critical the role you would say of the international observers was in Peru, and also what you think some of the more material movements or just like understandings that were gained from DSA being in Venezuela? Lay something out those critics who said this was just like a fun trip that was paid for you and your friends to go visit Latin America.
Here's what I would say. I come from a working class background, right? I would have loved to visit Machu Picchu while I was in Peru. I would have loved to go to the big falls in Venezuela while I was there. We didn't do that. You want to know why? We were literally working the whole damn time, right? The whole time in both instances, it was impossible to do anything but work with other leftists, network with the actual people. In Peru, election observing itself. Once again, we spent our entire time in Lima literally because we could not go anywhere else. And even while we were in Lima, I did not do even a second of sightseeing, right? The entire time was spent working with the people. The entire time was spent talking to people. And similarly in Venezuela, our entire time was spent, the majority, the vast majority.
My dog's gone crazy.
We didn't even spend that much time in Venezuela talking to government officials. The vast majority of time was spent talking to the communes. I lost count of how many communes we met with, right?
Wow.
Communes, not just in Caracas. We were also able to meet some in the rural communities, right? Some of the rural communes, which was an amazing experience, right? I met with communes that were so amazing that I have never even heard of, right?
Wow.
These are once again, these are people that people in the United States don't even know exist, right? And it's amazing to me, once again, what they are able to do in their communities where the state is unable to provide any sort of support because of how crippled the state has become. So once again, to anybody who thinks that we took a vacation, part of me wishes we did, right? Because I would love to go see these sites, but that we were unable to.
No, I think that kind of allegation was just BS, and a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines being very jealous.
Sure.
You at least got some good Venezuelan or Peruvian food though while you were there.
Oh, I'm still dreaming about the ceviche I had in Peru. Oh my goodness. And I tweeted about this. Here's the thing. I know about arepas, right? The national food of Venezuela. And I know tequeños, right? I'm of Puerto Rican descent. There's a lot of Venezuelans selling tequeños in Puerto Rico. What I did not know about, cachapas. Whoo! You want to try something delicious? Here's the thing, like a lot of foods in Latin America, right? A lot of it is okay. Let's see exactly what we can stuff inside of this tortilla. Same concept, except instead of tortilla, this was made of like pancake. So you had like a pancake with like steak, eggs, all these delicious things packed inside there. It was. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
I know, man. I haven't had dinner yet, so you're getting me going.
Well, exactly, me too.
Well, Austin, it's such a treat to have you on.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Once again, thank you so much for having me back on, and I'm always happy to come on in the future as well.
No, for sure.
Thanks, Austin. Check out Machete and Mate, everybody. Go subscribe to that now.
That is because my cat stepped on my mixing board and turned my sound off. Can you hear me now? That little adorable black cat just decided to choose violence and try and ruin the show. But anyway, I'm wrapping it up. Here's a link to that video that we just watched. There's more to it. That was a whole show. But I wanted to watch Austin on his little interview with Left Reckoning. I'm actually DMing with him currently to get us set up to do a show. So it'd be great to talk with Austin. And yeah, it's Hell yeah. But yeah, in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and who are we gonna raid here today? We raided Dan yesterday. Who else we got here? Let's do Bleep Blomp Ben. All right, folks. Well, thanks everybody for joining the show. You can all support our program by going to patreon.com/Good Morning Comrade. You can be just like our current supporters: Ty Judy, Michael H, Dan O, Jonathan H, Timothy C, Dragon Slayer 19, who was in chat this morning, Andy L, Gary W, Kenneth M, Adam R, Trey M, Watermelon Pickle, and Penelope D. Thank you. Like I said before, I'm sending the Twitch folks off to Bleep Blanc Ben. Everybody else, have a lovely day.